And now, nektv brings you exclusive footage behind the scenes. From Plainfield, New Hampshire, and the home of Ed Brown. A taxing issue. Ed Brown in his own words. As recorded by John Stoddard Klar.
How'll do, everyone? I'm Eric Benson, station manager at nektv, Newport, Vermont. With me today, John and Jackie Klar. John and Jackie have been involved in what might be considered an exciting and yet, albeit at times dangerous, video enterprise, and that is the opportunity to share the opinions of one Ed Brown. Ed Brown is right now involved in a political tax battle, if you will, in Plainfield, New Hampshire at his home.
Well, perhaps a little background would be helpful. Ed Brown, as you know, is in a standoff with federal authorities over their efforts to tax him down in Plainfield, New Hampshire. How we came to be involved is a combination of events which is kind of interesting in its own right. As you know, I've written a book that is critical of the Bush administration and some of the federal policies that are being imposed upon us under the guise of protection, etc. And over the last year or so, as I've been doing a lot of interviews around the country, more and more Americans who are in the alternative media have gained interest in that. That has led many of them who Ed is connected with to trust my integrity and to have me recognized as a person who speaks for some of their interests. So when this arose, I became aware of it through the internet long before the press was aware of it. And I actually initially contacted Ed to try to persuade him to consider alternatives. He made it clear that he did not want to. I respect that. He knows I respect that. But then we had the idea that actually Jackie had the idea, why don't you go down to nektv and get the camera and go down and film the man? And I said, that's a wonderful idea. Thank God for putting my wife in my life to have such ideas. So we did come in, as you know. We got the camera. When the verdicts were rendered yesterday in the jury trial against him and his wife in Plainfield, we were there. And we filmed not only Ed, but we filmed his interviews with the mainstream media. We filmed the mainstream media filming him. We went in the home and we're filming some segments in there with Ed, with his trust. Ed trusts us because he knows that I've been working for a time without a view towards profit to try to educate people. He knows that I'm working now without a view towards profit to try to educate people. It'll be very clear in the video that Ed does not trust the mainstream media, but he trusts us in nektv to come in there and try to capture a documentary sort of recording of events and his perspective without tainting it for sound bites for a 1 or 2 minute blurb on Boston or other television. So there's a very great amount of trust there that's been generated that in us and from Ed and those people.
So for all the video crews, news crews, major media crews that were there at Ed's home, your crew were the only folks allowed in by Ed into his home to talk to him one-on-one. And it's based upon that trust that he has with you and the trust that he has that public access community television allows everyone's voice to be heard. And he was afraid that that wouldn't take place, I guess, with the other media sources. So you went down there, and what were you feeling? Maybe Jackie, you can tell me a little about what was it like driving down there and arriving?
Well, we didn't really know what we were going to be facing when we got there. We didn't know if the feds were going to be there and the place was going to be, you know, we'd be watching them throwing tear gas through the windows or what was going to happen. And so we were a little apprehensive, and that's why I went to be the camera person instead of my son. And when we got there, the road was blockaded. Actually, he has a very long driveway going into his estate. And it was blockaded, and we walked down this steep hill. It was all ice, and it was, you know, we didn't really know what we were going to be facing. So it was a little nerve-wracking. And they were very selective as to who they were letting in. They wanted to know who we were, why we were there, if we had an appointment, if Ed knew we were coming, and because they didn't trust also that the federal government might send somebody in posing as news media in order to gain access and to try to take them down that way. So,
well, and I would add that My anxiety was more that we wouldn't get there in time, that the feds would be there and wouldn't allow us in, and we wouldn't have an opportunity to do this for Ed and those people, but also for you, for the public, to see what's going on. And so I was very relieved when we got there, and I didn't feel any apprehension once we got there, because I'd spent 2 days talking with the man on the phone. We built a rapport. He doesn't want to kill anybody. You'll see this in the video. He doesn't want to shoot me or anyone else. I have absolute trust that when I was there, that he wasn't going to hurt me, and I really wasn't too fearful that the feds were going to rush in and do something rashly. If they did, that I didn't have any control over that. So my anxiety was that we get there in a timely fashion and be allowed to get there and do something for everyone's edification, for people to learn. And we did, and we were successful, and we're really pleased that we can do that. And we're pleased for Ed, too, because I think, yes, his trust is being paid off here, and hopefully that's a reward for him, that he can get his views and his side out untainted.
You also had an opportunity to speak to some of the supporters who have been coming. Maybe you can mention about the folks that are coming to Ed Brown's house to support him.
Well, and again, maybe we should mention a little bit more, not to toot my horn, but having written a book that's critical of the Bush administration, my website is www.christianwords.us. Perhaps it'll be on the screen at some point, so that people can see some of the arguments I've been making that have galvanized a lot of people around the country. And the mainstream media have been very uncomfortable criticizing this president for the last year and a half, while I've been doing so in the alternative media and to others. And I'm a conservative Christian lawyer, a very odd combination. There's a fellow that has interviewed me a couple of times. His name is Rick Stanley. He's out of Denver, Colorado. He is very much a patriot, and he has a lot of connections with a lot of people. He's very, very busy. So when this happened, I found out about it over the internet through Rick and others, and Rick then told Ed, "You can trust John." Rick deserves a lot of credit for having organized and educated people enough so that you have an additional event. You not only have Ed standing up to the federal government, an extraordinary thing in its own right, but you have dozens or hundreds of people making similar risks, some of them traveling from all across the country, some of them potentially armed, some of them with cameras, maybe with guns, who knows, because they feel so strongly about these issues as well that they're willing to risk things as well. This is unprecedented. This is different from other standoffs in that very reason. And as you watch this film of Ed, you will notice that the media, the mainstream media, are rather mystified. They're completely clueless as to why people would go, because they are not tapped into this alternative, internet-oriented source of news that all of these people are. So Rick Stanley and all the others out there, there are many, many groups and Yahoo groups. I don't mean to exclude any, but Rick was very instrumental, in getting the word out. And that's also why Ed trusted me, because he knows from Rick that I can be trusted, and I trust Rick, and we trust one another. So there are a lot of things moving here to create this whole situation and why it is we're here today.
And Ed has an incredible trust for the concept of community television to not just give a sound bite, but to allow him the opportunity to express his opinion and let the American people be the judge. It doesn't matter if a viewer is in support or against. What Ed wants is for people to understand his opinion and his position. And that's what NEKTV is allowing to take place. We are the facilitators of free speech. And we really, here at NEKTV, appreciate the work that you folks have done to help this process along of giving the opportunity for a platform for folks like Ed Brown to share their opinions about issues that affect all of us.
Yeah, as you'll see in the tape, he's very guarded with his interviews with the mainstream media, because he was a little concerned that they'd be cutting things or putting things together to make him look like a nut. And he's just a regular guy, and he's very educated and very well read, and he's not a real crazy kind of person like you would think would be standing up against the government. So he felt that NEKTV was going to present things as they really were, in an unbiased, uncut, uncensored sort of.
Right.
And if I may add again, it really is an honor to be having the opportunity to work here at this station, but for everyone's benefit, to try to bring forth some objective journalism. What's passing today as news is soundbite, kind of like our advertising. It's built around advertisers. It's built around levels of managers who are trying to appease advertisers or government interests. Public television is about real news. You're watching real news here. You're watching something educational. And that's what you're capturing here, and that's what Ed trusts, and that's what allows us to do this. He doesn't want to be taking his worst picture of him and the worst thing he says, and that's all America ever sees of him. Why would he risk everything he's built for years and years? Why would he risk his life? His wife is in tears and elsewhere. He's risking everything. He says for our freedom. That's what we want people to judge for themselves. Not because of what we say, but to give the man an opportunity to see what's really going on here and look at the broader issues that he's trying to alert us about, that we will talk about a little more later with your permission. So, great. This is an opportunity for us to try to project objectively what it is this man's about and who he is. And we do genuinely care about him. We genuinely care about our country and about the people who are traveling there with him. The people that are there from the media, not to denigrate them, but they're there because they're earning a paycheck. They're there to answer to people. They're there with makeup on and polish, and that is their business. That's not our business. We're not being paid. We're taking risks, if there are any, as I say, because we believe in something that's more important than whether it makes the ratings tonight. We're not motivated by just pecuniary gain, profit. And this is what maybe more Americans will see is real news and has been lacking in our country for a long time. It was a blustery day as we walked to the home of Ed Brown, whom I had never met before. Past the blockades, right to Ed's barriered home. Other media reps and their cameras were restricted to the outdoors, or at best the garage.
On state land. I say business because they are registered on Dun & Bradstreet as a business. Did you know that?
Jackie and I were welcomed inside and made to feel at home. The mainstream media are outsiders. We are not. The top question on everyone's mind: why are you taking this stand?
Freedom. You should hear right now, if we went on a telephone to some conference calls, the blogs all over the internet, and it's blog upon blog upon blog upon, because that's right. This isn't a standoff because of something I want to do. This is because I'm standing up for them.
You know, when I said to the reporter out there, I said, is Ed crazy because he's willing to die for money, or are they crazy because they're willing to kill for money? Because you're not a threat to anybody. It's about their power. But I'm smiling because several times today I was going to quote to you Revelation, but I know you're not a New Testament guy. But Revelation 18 says that when these terrible things happen, global warming and everything else, to rejoice. And you've been rejoicing, and you're echoing a sentiment of the New Testament there, and I didn't want to be pushy or sound like that.
I'm a little wired, I'm a little fearful, but the bottom line is, guys, there's a change here right now. History's about to be made here, not because of me, but because of the people are finally coming together based on a single action of just saying no. Digged their heels in and said no. Enough is enough.
We're here today to talk with Ed Brown, who has just heard the announcement of the guilty verdicts rendered against him in the local court in regard to an ongoing tax dispute with the federal government and the legitimacy of their power to tax Americans. Mr. Brown, thank you very much for allowing us in our home.
Yes, sir. Glad to have you here.
Well, I guess people would probably have a lot of questions for you, and I would ask you to tell them perhaps what you would want them to know about their federal government and why it is that you're fighting it right now.
We started an investigation after the Waco incident. I think it was that 92, I believe it was, or 91, into what happened at Waco. And as we continued the investigation, we found out what did happen and who did it and for what reason. We started to realize that other things had to be looked at, and the taxes, the income tax, is one of the things we discovered that had a lot of interest for us, because we were paying a very large amount every year, $137,000 in one 12-month period. So we thought it was worth taking a look at. So we did. When we investigated, after about a couple of years, we discovered that the IRS code, or the IRS tax, was not a lawful tax on the American people in the states. The IRS is a lawful entity in the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and so on, but it is not in the states of the 50 Union states. So with that information, we began to write letters to the Internal Revenue Service to find out what law there was, because we couldn't find it in their manuals, which we acquired quite early, as to what our tax obligation was. And we never got a response. So we continued with the questions and stuff, but at the same time we will continue getting our bills and paying our taxes for that initial period of time. Then when we found out they weren't going to answer the question, we figured the best way to get them to answer the questions of where is the law that we're not supposed to pay would be simply just to stop paying. And we figured we'd get some response that way. So we did. We stopped paying the tax, and for a period of 8 years, after a little running back and forth and them stealing money out of our accounts and so on, they finally, ultimately, let it go, it seemed, we thought. And we heard nothing from them for quite a few years, until 2004. In 2004, the Internal Revenue Service made a surprise raid at 7:30 in the morning, just as while we were arriving at work. And my wife was arriving at work, and I would come in behind her about 2 minutes later. And there were agents everywhere. I pulled into the yard, and I asked them why they were there. They said they had a search warrant to get information from my wife's computer. I said, well, why so much firepower, as I'm looking around and seeing? And that firepower turned out to be to approximately 20 IRS agents, all armed and all armored, bulletproof vests. There was a sniper up on the hill, state policeman under Christopher Arcoigne's command, which of course he just ordered them out. I don't think he was there, but he might have been there, with 3 observers. There was 2 state troopers also in their cruisers at the top of the hill, and another state trooper across in the Powerhouse Mall on Glen Road in West Lebanon. And there were 2 U.S. Marshals, and there was 1 postal officer by the name of John Hickey out of Boston. I had no idea why they were there. While they were there, the warrant, they had no affidavit with the warrant, they just had a so-called warrant. But I asked them, I said, Mr. Hickey, you seem to be in charge. I said, why are you here? He said, because we had found out that you were structuring postal money orders. I said, what does that mean, Mr. Hickey? He said, that means that if you buy postal money orders at $3,000 or more, okay, then, and you don't, or less, or slightly less, then we feel it would be laundering of money and very suspicious, so it would get red flagged. So that being said, I said, well, what triggered you to finally, I did that for like 3 or 4 years. No, there was nobody saying anything about that. I talked to your postal clerk many times about my position, why I did it, because we earned the money from lawful wages. We bought postal money orders, which were lawful, and we just paid off the mortgage. And you can see a record that every penny was paid that way. So it's all lawful money, and we did it under a lawful manner. So why then are you down here now on this assault, on this property? He said, because, quote, you stopped paying. I mean, you stopped buying the money orders. Well, yeah, because my mortgage was paid off. So I don't understand how you come up with that's a criminal action. And we had found out in law, in fact, that it can't be used that way. It's totally unlawful for them to use that structuring charge the way they're using it. That was designed to be used only for people dealing with drugs and that sort of thing, you know, trying to launder money, okay? So they're trying to say that this was laundering money. So, of course, laundering money from narcotics and stuff is illegal gain money or unlawfully gain money, trying to hide from everybody what you were doing. We were right out in the open. We were telling everybody about it even. There was no secret. So that was structuring. And then after that, and they were there for about 7 or 8 hours, they questioned all the people in the office, which they had no authority to do so. I was not on the warrant for them to be allowed to do that, but they did it anyway. So we had a case established. Everybody was afraid, scared, you know. There's all the girls down at the office and all these guys with guns and stuff around, flashing around. So my wife, a few months later, began a lawsuit against them. No, 5 months later, actually, we filed suit against them, against the officers. I said, why did you do that? I missed that one. You got to cut that one out. I said, after we filed the suit in Grafton County Superior Court with Judge Jean Berling, she immediately turned the case over to the U.S. District Court in Concord. When she did that, she violated her own laws, state laws. It's a protectionist position. She's supposed to protect us against any outside entity. When the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, got the case, a couple of days later, they sent me a letter stating that I needed to come in and to discuss the matter with a judge. So I couldn't go into that court because it was unlawful jurisdiction. I knew that already. That's federal, I am state. So the federals, and I have all of the records, hard evidence that there's no jurisdiction here. But my case, my money was paid to the state court. State court turns over to the federal court. Federal court calls me in where I cannot go because it's a different jurisdiction, and this is a state court case that I had in New Hampshire. But they took it anyway, and then they dismissed the charges that I had placed against all these people I just mentioned to you before. James Hickey of the Postal Service, James John of the IRS, U.S. Attorney Morse, Assistant Attorney Moss, and Mr. Colin Tawano, his boss. So we ended up with the following year, in 2006, because that court case was 2005, we ended up the following year, 2006, with a slam dunk criminal charge case against us in retaliation for that case we had done to him in the previous year. And that became the horror show, the beginning of the horror show. That was May 24th in 2006, where they tricked me to go down into the 27 Glen Road, my wife's dental office, by saying I had a leak in the building, which of course I knew I didn't because I built the building and I knew how secure it was. So as I pulled in there, I knew this was the time that we're going to finally come to a confrontation with all of this. So I did. I let them arrest me, and what happened, the way that went down was I walked up to them, was going into the building because I knew what was happening, and I decided, no, let's go back and finish, let's get it going. So I'm back to this one individual by my drain. Mr. Brown, he's saying, Mr. Brown, come over here, I want to show you this. You're like a real nice guy to help me out. So they got close enough to him to where I brushed up by him to look down the hole. He grabbed me, and then about 3 or 4 others grabbed me, shoved me to the ground, screaming at the top of their lungs, get up, get up, get up. And I said, I can't get up. There's 1,000 pounds of man on top of me. Okay, oh. So they backed off, and they got me up and put me in handcuffs and shackles. Then they loaded me into a Lebanon Police Department cruiser in the back. That was an experience. And took me up to the police station. When I arrived at the police station, immediately the 2 U.S. Marshals came in. I believe it was 2 U.S. Marshals came in. They were in charge of the operation. And they strip searched me. Now, I didn't understand why this was all about because, well, whatever. They knew me well. They already took the gun that I carried on me, so I was not armed, so what are they also going to find? But what they did in the strip search was rather disgusting. They strip searched me, turned me around to face the wall, and ordered me to bend over, spread the cheeks of my buttocks while I was facing that camera in the Lebanon Police Department. Didn't bother me much. It didn't dehumanize me much, you know. But what it did is make me cry the next day when I really thought about it. Because if they're doing that to people, a lot of people are very sensitive about that kind of privacy, that kind of personal thing. That's one of the most horrible things I think you can do to another human being is something like that. So my sadness and my heart was for those people that really couldn't deal with it, couldn't handle it. And they know that because of that, down the road, I'm going to sue them. Big time.
We were interested to learn what other people who were standing with Ed had to say.
I would like to ask and beg that fellow Americans, our fellow Americans, to grow some guts and stand up for what's right and come join us in this. And you don't have to be suppressed just out of fear of our government, because what they're doing is they're robbing us and using our federal income tax to fill their own pockets. That's why we left England, to escape taxes. So when they wrote the Constitution, obviously they didn't write anything about any taxes. The taxes were added on later, and I'm lost right now. I'm tired.
We've heard all the press today, secular press too.
Correct.
And they've had their own agenda.
Correct.
What would you say to all the people that you've been hearing from, the Revolutionary Coalition, and Rick Stanley, and all the people who've been rallying around you? Do you have something you'd like to say to them? Thanks,
I love
or
these guys.
you know.
Well, I have been. I tell them all. I can't believe it.
But this will go out to them.
Yeah.
This is your chance to speak to them and have them see you, because nobody looks what you
Yes,
look
they
like,
do. We sent out
especially
pictures.
having these pictures.
Yeah, we sent out a blog.
Well, here's a chance too to if you want to just to
No, not
address.
right. My mind isn't into that right now. But
Okay.
But every time
Thank
I
you.
talk to them, okay, I'm always I'm saying to them that I just can't believe you're coming from. Okay, you come up to me, I'm cautious about you. You're an ex-lawyer, okay. But when you tell me about the farming, what you're living, I see, but he quit that stuff, okay, and he's doing this now. Because, okay, sure, come on now. Now, with your experience and past knowledge, you can be of extreme benefit. Not to Ed Brown. If we can stick this to them, their own law and their own rules, now we can help a whole bunch of other people do the same thing. And we grow in numbers doing the same thing until they find well, of course, you know I'm here for the evening anyway. When you get a chance, give me a call back, I guess. Talk to you soon. Bye. It gets taken from him out of his hands, and then it would come out of Washington. And it would then spend in these guerrillas, okay, that's all they do all year long is just train. Like the FBI has a hostage rescue team.
Right.
They send them in and just do this thing. When you saw the Waco incident, it was a good idea because you see these guys, these BDUs, black BDUs, coming in up the roofs and all that sort of thing, doing that thing and coming in. The one guy, 3 went in, 4th guy come in, threw in a stun grenade right behind those 3, shot and killed all 3 right through the window. They were all Clinton's bodyguards in that one. Wasn't it Clinton's bodyguards? Yeah, I think so. During the administration for a while, so they killed them for some reason. Made an excuse to look like it was, the Davidians that did it. But those are the kinds, he would be the one, that kind of team coming in. So we're talking because they're pitting the 2 of us together. And we're all like really very similar in our positions or capacities. I have people above me, he has people above him.
Right.
And it's like, okay, Gary, so you and I got to go nose to nose. But the only way that I can play this out is that if you come in and you attack me, my property, then I have no choice but to follow what the law says to do. He said, what does that mean? I said, I got to protect myself, so that means if you're going to come in, we'll have to go to war. Okay? And number 2, if you kill me, well, of course I've got to do what I have to do. And lethal force says use equal or greater force, even against police officers when you know you didn't break the law. It's in New Hampshire law, by the way, on the criminal law, lethal force. It's very easy to find.
I will not be a slave to any man for 1 second. I am a man of honor. My wife is a woman of honor. We can never, I have given myself that gift of honor, so has she. We can never lie, never cheat, never steal, never con in any way, ever. Never commit any kind of crimes whatsoever. So is it worth it to go through all this aggravation for the sake of my fellow men and women that are really honest, good people? Yeah, because somebody has to stop these criminal people. And I'm here to tell you, sir, you are about to see something in this country, in this world, that you have never seen before.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Benson here with John and Jackie Klar, and promised an opportunity to come back and just wrap up about some of the issues and some of the things that Mr. Brown had touched upon during his interview that he had with you. So, John, maybe you could just give us a few parting thoughts here.
Well, and some of these observations stem from chats with Ed and others there that are not on tape by anyone. We were there a long time, and this has been, in a way, building for a long time. Ed has a beef with the IRS, but it's linked to broader issues. As something that I've been doing work on, and we may do some more work here, and it would be helpful if people would let us know if they want to learn more. The No Child Left Behind Act was used supposedly to educate our children more, but in fact it has provisions to reinforce the military by military recruitment, mandatory registration for our children. It's already happening. We must wonder, why is something being touted or presented as one thing and then used for other purposes? And by the way, it was not funded at all for the tutorials and other things that were supposed to be there for underperforming children. The USA Patriot Act gives George Bush the power to suspend national elections with the sweep of a pen co-signed by Alberto Gonzalez in the event he declares a national emergency. That legislation was passed through without very much reflection by Congress or much public comment. Many people around the country are concerned about those powers. We can give you the site links to look it up yourself. It's a huge document. That's why we're all going yawn, but we need to look in there because he has the power to seize our food, seize our gasoline, seize our sources of power in our automobiles. Why is the government giving itself those kinds of powers now when we're not even supposedly at war? Recently, in October, the Military Commissions Act suspended all kinds of constitutional rights of Americans. The right of habeas corpus, which is the right to appear before a court and even demonstrate that you are an American citizen and not subject to its terms. It suspends the right to cross-examine witnesses. It has secret tribunals and courts. It has the ability to use coerced testimony. They can introduce hearsay against you, which is never allowed in normal courts in most forms. These are sweeping changes in our laws that are not being discussed in our national media. Ed and other people know that. Ed and other people are trying to highlight this. The John Warner National Defense Authorization Act of 2007, also passed in October of last year with Democrat complicity, that will now be very difficult to repeal, allows the federal government for the first time to use our National Guard troops and our military against civilian populations. It gives George Bush the power to, by himself, declare when he'll use those federal powers against American civilians because of political insurrection, because he decides that the state can't handle it. This is unprecedented. It changes the whole structure of government. The states are not in charge of their own National Guard troops anymore. Why isn't this in the media? Ed Brown is about these broader issues, about global warming and how it is that we're depleting all of our oil and not seeking alternative resources because corporate America is driving our boat, our government, and our media. That's what you're seeing and learning about here with Ed Brown. The draft, which will soon be enacted in this country, it's already in Congress. It's already there. All we need is some triggering event to scare us into embracing it, probably in Iran. So Ed Brown is about sacrificing himself because he can't risk his life against federal agents to educate you about the Military Commissions Act or about the USA Patriot Act. When those things come to happen, where will we go? What will we do? So there are broader issues here. And one of the broader issues is that the media are not talking about this, that the alternative media is. And this is apparently sort of an alternative media forum today.
That's what community access television is all about, having these voices that aren't out there, allowing them to be heard.
So when we look at a man who very possibly, will die, or has already been killed as we talk about this, this is not, I think we all realize, this is not play games here. We're not just being hyped. This is a very grave situation. We're all very concerned. The government should be, and I think is very concerned, how it's perceived and how it responds. And we hope that the government is learning here, too, to not be rash in how it responds to Americans resisting. Others around the country are wondering, okay, maybe taxes aren't our battle, maybe we think there are other battles, but we support what he's trying to do. Do we draw arms At what point do we draw arms against our government? When it takes away our constitutional rights. This government has not just been influencing the media against us to further its own agenda, it's even influencing now the drama media. The television show 24, the government was very involved in helping them shape a plot line for this year that leads Americans to think and believe that, in fear, that they should surrender their constitutional rights in the name of security. Ben Franklin said, "He who would trade his liberty for security deserves neither." If we are to listen to our founding fathers who gave their lives to create the Constitution to prevent these kinds of things happening, if we are to give our faith, for those of us who have faith in God, to His higher authority who would not have us kill and torture in violation of His laws, then we must become educated. We must listen to the Ed Browns and others of this world who are telling us to find out the truth. Otherwise, our complacency leads to the very problems we have. Congress cannot take these powers back from George Bush once he initiates them. He has veto power, and there's no power there to override him. The executive has become more powerful than ever as the federal government has become more powerful than ever. That's what this is really about. It's about educating you, about us becoming educated. And here at NEKTV, we're going to do another segment with Ed, God willing, and that we can get there and back safely, about some of these issues, about why he would take these risks, about his faith and his future and our future. And if you have interest, we will do shows documenting the sources for you to look at about the Military Commissions Act, about the other laws this government is passing, because we owe it to the Founding Fathers, to ourselves, to our God, and to our children to look at these issues, to make decisions. Even if we don't agree with one another, at least we have the information to make some decisions. And that's what this is all about. And I'm grateful to have an opportunity to work at a station like this to bring this information to you folks. And thank you very much, and God bless you.
Well, if you would like to know more about John Klar and the interesting and informative research that he's been able to conduct, you may want to visit his website at www.christianwords.us. That's www.christianwords.us. Or you can visit the NEKTV website at www.nektv.com.
We all have a duty to ourselves to get informed. Go out, get informed, look at the info, surf the net, watch alternative television, find some resources. Fox TV is not news. Studies have shown that people who watch Fox TV are more uninformed about actual facts. This isn't bias, this is a fact when they are surveyed than people who watch almost any other news media. CNN is no longer reliable either. So let's start to create a demand in America for alternative programming like this that isn't dictated by agendas other than our own desire for truth. And I really wanted to ask people, please pray for Ed Brown and for his family and for the government to do things that are right for all of us. Pray for us to learn more truth, and pray for Jackie and me when we go back down that we can do things that are right by all involved, including you folks.
In a free society, there should be a free exchange of ideas. No matter where you stand on these issues that have been mentioned, you should educate yourself and equip yourself to be able to give an account of your opinion when called upon to do so. Appreciate the opportunity for you two to go out there and to bring back the opinions shared by these folks, and hopefully in the future be able to touch on some of these other interesting issues and informative issues to share with our viewing public.
It would be our honor.
Until next time, I'm Eric Benson.